Hello, McAllister. It's good to be back. Many of you don't remember this, but a long time ago, a much younger Kalia, pre-pregnancy, pre-babies, pre-marriage, the late homecomer was the common book for McAllister, and so I came here to deliver the keynote. It's been a heartbeat since I've been back. But what an important time. When the invitation came, I knew that I would say yes. Because I think in an age of forgetting, systematic erasure of so many stories, so many histories all around our world, now is a time when writers and memoirists like myself, when we have to stand up for the power of stories. And what better way to meet a writer than immediately with her words? The music that you're hearing is composed by Jocelyn Hagen, a Minnesota composer who I've collaborated with many times on my children's book titles, but also on the Song Poet Opera. It is original music to accompany this book, The Rock in My Throat. You've heard my biography. Now you will hear a story of how that story happens. If we could cue up the slides, that would be wonderful. I became a children's book author in 2019. We all know what happened in 2020. And so I never learned how to do this cool thing that many people in this room, I'm sure, can do. I'm going to stand up here and read from the open book, and the slides are going to magically advance so you get the best visuals. This is The Rock in My Throat, this year's Apollo Honor title, this year's Minnesota Children's Book Award winner. It is illustrated by Ji-Mei Lin, who competed for Team USA in the World Illustration Contest this year using this book. But this is my story. Dedication. For everyone who has trouble speaking, trouble being heard, for everyone who has lived without understanding on their side. Ji-Mei's dedication for my parents. The rock in my throat. Recess is the hardest time of the day. All the kids are playing, some are on the playground and others are in the field by the side of the school. There's a group on the pavement in front of me. The teachers are all busy watching over the kids and talking. I look at the sky, I look at the ground, I look at my feet, I look at my hands. I look all around so that people can't see that I'm lonely. I am relieved when I see a feather on the ground. It is a gray feather, a small one like dandelion fluff, only a little bigger. I pick it up. It is soft in my hands. It is mysterious. I hold it in one hand. I touch it with my other. I study it. I am more interested in the feather today than I was interested in the leaf yesterday. After school, I tell my mother about the sky and the ground. I tell her my feet are small, but my hands might grow large. I tell her about the feather I found, the feather I have in my pocket. My mother says in Hmong, her words make me stop talking. I feel the feather in the pocket of my jeans become smaller and smaller. Inside my pocket, my right hand reaches for the place where the feather is, afraid that it will disappear. Later, I look at my mother across the table from me. I will never tell her about the moment I decided to stop talking if I can help it. I don't want to be like the many people who speak English. There's a rock in my throat now, and it grows heavier by the day. I don't want to be like the woman in the store, the woman who tapped her hand on the counter when my mother tried to ask where the light bulbs were, but didn't know the English words. The one who looked away when my mother said, "I'm looking for the thing that makes the world shiny." The English words in my mother's mouth were sweet and sticky like candy, and they wrapped themselves up in her teeth. Her tongue tried to free the words, but it took time that the English-speaking people don't have. That day, the woman grew bigger and bigger behind the counter. My mother and I grew smaller and smaller in front of it. And now I blink and blink and blink. Across the dining table, I shrug at my mother, letting my shoulders go up and then down. I say, "Gucci both here?" At first, no one noticed when I stopped talking at school. I continue to sit at my assigned desk. I continue to keep my desk clean, my hands to myself. I continue to keep my eyes on the teacher at the front of the classroom. One day, our teacher is sick. We have a substitute who looks a lot like our teacher. She doesn't know who any of us are, but she has a list with our names on it. She calls them one by one. My last name starts with a Y, and I know I'm last. I try to clear my throat. I listen as all the kids say here when their names are called. Trying to get the air out of my mouth feels like I'm pushing my heart up into my throat. When the teacher says Kao Yan, I really try to say here, but the only sound I'm able to make is a shaking cough. She says louder, scanning the room, trying to find me among the desks. The teacher finds me because all the other children are looking at me. They are not all mean looks. A few of them, the nice ones, show on their faces that they hurt a little for me. I dig into the carpet of our classroom with the tip of my shoes. I want the floor to open up and suck me down through the thin carpet, through the thick cement, through the pipes, through the basement, through the ground, all the way to the core of the earth, so that the burning in my face would feel cool next to the plasma underneath everything. Instead, I raise my hand, feeling the heat rise from my throat. The substitute looks at me and smiles. Next time, speak a little louder. All day long, the volume of my listening to her voice is turned up on high. I can't focus on the math problems in my worksheet. When it is free writing time, I can't write anything at all. Every time she asks a question, I look away so she doesn't ask me anything. I'm exhausted when I get home. I'm exhausted every day after that. I'm exhausted every time I go to school. I'm exhausted every time we are in the world that speaks English. The only place I'm able to rest is at home. Everyone at home speaks Hmong, my mother, my father, my older sister, and my aunts and uncles and cousins when they visit. Everyone speaks normally to everyone else. It is a song, uninterrupted, and it flows and flows. It is time for parent-teacher conferences. The teacher sits on one side of the table. My father, mother, older sister, and I sit on the other. The teacher wants to know, does Kao speak at home? My sister says in Hmong. This teacher also wants to know if Kalia speaks at home. My father and mother look at each other, and then my mother says, tell her Kalia speaks all the time. My sister says in English, my mother wants me to tell you that at home Kao speaks all the time. The teacher bites her bottom lip a little and flattens the line of her mouth, looking at me like I'm a puzzle. The teacher stops biting her bottom lip and the corners of her mouth lift in a smile. She says, Kao is doing well in everything, but she won't talk at school. I turn the volume of my listening down. I focus on the wall behind my teacher's head. I imagine the concrete crumbling and the world outside coming in. The birds, the wind, the leaves touching at their tips. They're clapping for me, but the hands in my lap are clasped tight together. In the car on the way home, my family is quiet. Once in a while, my father looks at me through the rearview mirror. My mother turns her head to check on me. My sister pats my hand. They all feel bad for me. I feel bad for all of us. Our brown car coughs into the air every few seconds. Puffs of smoke rise behind us. No one says anything. I know we all have rocks in our throats, and each of us is trying our best. The problem is that mine has grown too big and heavy for me to move. Recess is the worst time of the day. The pebble I've picked up is the size of the tip of my little finger. Its surface is gray, but it has speckles of white. In the light of the sun on my palm, the white sparkles like diamonds. It is the most interesting thing I have ever seen in my life. The girl in front of me speaks very clearly and slowly. She says, "Do you want to play with me?" All of my heart wants to play with her, but the weight of the rock is too heavy for my tongue to lift. My throat works, but the words don't come out. The rock grows bigger and bigger as the seconds pass. I don't know how to dislodge it, so I grip the little pebble in my palm. I don't look at her, and I shake my head, no. When she walks away, I repeat her name again and again. Julia, Julia, Julia Chang, I tell myself. One day, maybe she can be my friend. That is 7-year-old Kalia standing right there smiling. That is selective mute Kalia, who has no voice outside of her home, smiling because her father says that she looks so good in her brand new jeans. I'm going to read to you from the author's note. It's a little small from where you all are seated. I was 6 years old and my family came to America as refugees of war from the camps in Thailand. For the first years of my life, Hmong was the language that I had built my home in. When I entered school, English was everywhere. Slowly, I picked it up in bits and pieces. I liked the way the words tasted different in my mouth, the way they did not need more air to float, the way they connected to one another, not like words holding hands, but like magnets and metal. Everything changed when I was 7 years old. I became a selective mute in English halfway between first and second grade. I stopped talking at school. I got by with nodding and doing the thumbs up. In fact, I wouldn't speak in English voluntarily until I went to college. In college, I learned how to whisper. When I became a writer, some of my childhood teachers came to my events to hear my voice. They knew me, they all said I hadn't changed much, but they had never heard me talk before. A few of them wept, hearing my voice for the first time. One of the big questions in all of my years of silence was why? At 43 years old, I'm finally ready to answer. This book is that answer. I'm answering the children who asked the question directly and sincerely all those years ago when I couldn't answer them, the children who were trying to understand. I'm answering the children who, like me, were also quiet and weren't sure why or were afraid of hurting the people around them with their honest answers. I want each child who is afraid to talk, unable to find the words, to know that sometimes it takes a long time for us to understand and an even longer time to express ourselves. I'm answering the question for the second grade child who was me, young Kalia, who wanted and wished desperately to one day be able to answer this question for herself, her teachers, and especially her family. Mother, you used to say, I don't understand why you won't speak at school. I used to tell you, I don't know either. Mother, I can tell you now, as a child, I saw the people who spoke fluent English walk away from your efforts to be understood, and I felt your pain. I couldn't protect you, so I did the only thing I knew to do. I stopped talking in English. It was my great revolution against a world I knew was not listening to you. I couldn't control when the rock in my throat started weighing me down. I felt sad and sorry that I couldn't speak for myself or for you for so many years. But those years have come and gone. I now know that sometimes the words that I cannot speak into the world, I can write in it. Now, when I think back to all those silent years when I listened and listened, I am filled with gratitude for the lessons I learned. I'm thankful that I know to be patient when others are struggling into language. I understand so well what it is like to be lonely, and in the end, to love and appreciate the people who offer friendship. Julia Chang became my friend, first through the letters that we wrote to each other, and then later through the life experiences we shared. Thank you. We're here today to talk about the power of stories. You heard my bio. Now you know how long it's taken me to stand up, to speak, to have this weak voice amplified by the strength of a microphone so that I can blow with the winds of humanity. You understand a little bit more what's behind me, the little woman with the red hands, the one who used to ask me, why won't you speak at school? The one who I couldn't tell the truth to for the longest time. The one whose story I wrote this year in Where Rivers Part. My mother's memoir, McAllister, You Had Me Come for the Late Homecomer. That was a 22-year-old girl's attempt to write the story of her grandmother, the story of her people. I wrote the song Poet, and that becomes the first Hmong American production to be on an operatic stage in America. And this past year, I wrote Where Rivers Part, my mother's story, to speak to a world that sees her in it sometimes, but does not understand her. My mother's name is Ju Mua. That's not the name that she was born with, but nobody alive remembers the name that she was born with. My mother really, she was a special woman because she was the first literate girl in her village. She had dreams of one day becoming a nurse, but those dreams were shattered. Those of you here, all of you here in St. Paul, Minnesota, if you don't know, then you should know. Minnesota is #1 in secondary refugee resettlement in the nation. No other state draws more refugees in, no matter where they're initially sent, than the state of Minnesota. My mother and my father are those refugees, and so was I, 6-year-old me. You know about the war, some of you know about the war that brought us here, the secret war in Laos, the undocumented war, a war in which little boys ages 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 were asked to do the work that their fathers could not finish. The US government couldn't issue combat boots for little children, so they issued lots of socks. But everybody who survived that war, every single soldier I've spoken to, they all say they know, because Laos was the most heavily bombed nation in the world, only the world didn't know it. They knew that every time a bomb fell, if the shoes came flying off first, then it was the children dying again. That secret war led to the genocide of my people. Gausan Patat Lao, the leading communist paper, published its agenda. It is necessary to extirpate down to the root the Hmong minority. My family, like thousands of others, waited for peace and big trucks came, men with guns, rounding up the survivors. The women and the girls waited in their villages for those survivors to return. Weeks passed, they started looking for them, and they found their bodies rotting on the jungle floor like fallen fruit. That is the war that made me possible. It wasn't a war in my American history books. It wasn't something I studied in college, but that is the war that is produced. I can see you sitting there. Some of McAllister's own students, a few generations now. My mother is one of those people, and when we talk about the war, we don't talk about the thing that happens at the end of it. So I'm gonna read to you just a little bit from Where Rivers Part. The book is called Where Rivers Part because my mother was born in the village of Dechua in Xinjiang province. Dechua is when rivers come together. She's journeyed, of course, around the world now to what the native people here call Bidote, the convergence of the great Minnesota and the great Mississippi River, a site of genesis and a site of genocide. And so I'm going to read a little bit from this book. What happens at the end of everything? It is the beginning of everything else. The book opens with a quote by the Renaissance writer Dorothy West. There is no life that does not contribute to history. There is no life that does not contribute to history. And it opens with a poem. Although I am a song poet's daughter, I wouldn't call myself a poet. And this is that poem. There was once a Hmong house that sat where two rivers met. The house was made of wood. There was a shingle bamboo roof on top. Out back, there was a garden filled with herbs and spices. In my memories, the house fills my heart. Remembering it makes me weep. One day, I will return. This Hmong house will be full of people again. Mother will sit among the flowering mint in the garden. Father will stand by the door underneath the overhang of the roof. My brothers and sisters will abound. The living and the dead will be together at long last. There was once a monk house that sat where two rivers met. And I'm going to take you to the end of the book. So my mother was 16 years old when she married my father. There was a large contingent of communist soldiers hunting out the Hmong, the remaining Hmong in the jungles of Laos. And they divided my mother from her family. She chose to walk with my father toward this life where my life would be possible. And in so doing, she left her mother and everybody else behind. My mother never saw her mother again. All these years later, she wakes up from the same dream, the same nightmare. They're in that jungle. The soldiers are coming. Her mother is going to go to a mountain stream because she wants to feed her daughter one last time. A little bit of rice left to make porridge. But my father says the soldiers are coming, and that if they don't leave, then they will be stuck. They fight. Her brothers and her sisters, everybody hears. And so my mother, because she's young, and she tells me because she's stupid, she allows him to pull her away. So her mother stands there with a water pail. No words of goodbye, no last holds, no last kisses. That's it, that's all. So this is 2018, and we've returned finally with my mom and my dad to Laos. And I'm writing in my mother's perspective, so the I here is Jumua. I didn't rush our meeting. I didn't run out of the truck or leave the door open as I raced to my eldest brother, who had told me on the phone that it was me who had blanketed his heart after our father died. I moved slowly, shyly. I got out of the car, I closed the door, I pulled my shirt with damp hands low over my body. Then I walked toward him, a smile on my face, one of my hands shielding my eyes from the bright sun. A real smile swept over my body as my vision clouded over. I said, "Va, it is you." We stood inches apart. He said, "Meinong, you are home. You are finally home." Another endearment from long ago, little seed. We held each other for the briefest of moments. He wiped his eyes. He dried his tears. New ones fell, streaking his wrinkled face. He said, "It has been too long." He shook his head disbelievingly. He said, "You came too late to see our mother." I'd returned decades too late to see my mother. And yet here we were at long last, standing face to face. I had left when I was 16 years old for a marriage. It had taken me 4 decades to return to my family. Then there were the experiences that years alone could never measure. All the heartache, the hard days, the happy ones too. The smile on my face wouldn't go away when I was a girl. Whenever Va returned from trips, he'd come back with candy. The smile on my face now, I knew, was the same one that waited for him then. Suddenly, we were surrounded by nieces and nephews and their children, by my remaining sisters-in-law. We greeted each other. We made small talk. We laughed. Plastic chairs were pulled out of the circle of houses that framed a communal yard. A small table was set up. A pitcher of water and glasses followed. Shong took out the bag of oranges that I had left in the car. I asked, "Where's Mai?" A nephew, lanky, with skin darkened by the sun, said, "Oh, she's old and forgetful now, Auntie Chu. Auntie Mai is not as she was when you last saw each other." He said to one of the children in the yard, "Go get Auntie Mai from her shed." Mai walked slowly toward my daughters and me, no taller than the child who'd been sent to fetch her. She was now an old woman. Strands of white hair rustled out of the traditional blue cloth she tied on top of her head. Her feet, clad in flip-flops, were the same color as the earth she walked on, gray and dusty. My older sister, teller of 1,000 stories, my gentle sister who had lived through so much. The nephew said, "She can't hear well now. You have to yell." He showed us how. "Auntie Mai, Auntie Chu, your sister is visiting from America with her children and uncle. Come so they can say hello." Mai nodded her head, signifying that she understood. She walked a little faster. I got up off the chair, waiting for her to come to me, but she walked directly to Dao. Dao got up to greet her aunt with a smile, hands out. Mai clasped both of Do's hands tight. Mai looked up at her and said, "Ju, is it really you? Have you really returned to Laos?" Do shook her head as tears fell. She pointed to me. She turned Mai's body toward me. "Auntie Mai, I'm Ju's oldest daughter. My mom is that one." Mai looked at me like a stranger. She said, "Really?" The nephew added, "Auntie Ju, her eyes are also very bad now." The nephew yelled, "Yes, Auntie Mai, it is your sister, Ju. Go so that she can say hello." Mai approached me slowly, each step stilling on the ground as if she were walking toward a figment or the edge of a steep cliff. In front of me, within touching distance, she stopped and looked up. She pointed a finger at my face. She asked, her words as slow as those of the tall doctor in that small room I'd visited in my sadness had been, "Is it really you, Ju?" She turned around and asked the others, "Is this another dream?" The smile I had discovered and held frozen fell from my face. The wall I had been leaning on toppled. In its fall, the dust of the ages rose up, and in the yellow light of early evening, I became young again, young and hurt, going to my oldest living sister for comfort. Her arms enveloped me. I felt the slow patting on my back, her voice saying, "You are home, Ju. You are home." That is from Where Rivers Part. Again, not in the history books, not in the newspapers, the power of stories, the power of stories. We, each of us, vessels of them all. Now, one more selection. Somewhere in the Unknown World, my pandemic book, a little known book, a Minnesota Book Award finalist, a Kirkus Best of the Year. But it is a collection of 15 different refugee stories, all here in Minnesota, housed in the Twin Cities. And you want to know exactly why I'm reading this one, because this story belongs to McAllister's Myra Muchik. But the book opens with my favorite poem. Quilting is, Lucille Clifton is my favorite American poet, and this is quilting her poem, my favorite poem. Somewhere in the unknown world, a yellow-eyed woman sits with her daughter quilting. Some otherwhere alchemists mumble over pots, their chemistry stirs into science, their science freezes into stone. In the unknown world, the woman threading together her need and her needle nods toward the smiling girl. Remember, this will keep us warm. How does this poem end? Do the daughters' quilt? Do the alchemists practice their tables? Do the worlds continue spinning away from each other forever? Myra's story is called Up Close, It Is Different. I boarded the plane against the better judgment of my mother and father for Nyala, the capital of the state of South Darfur in southwest Sudan, not knowing what to expect. I was 23 years old at the time. I had started working for the American Refugee Committee. I was not the team's first choice to go on the trip, but everyone else's visa had been denied. I was a recent college graduate, and my resume was clean. Mine was the only visa approved. My task was to see what the 100,000 people in a refugee camp in South Darfur needed in terms of humanitarian relief. At ARC, we were interested in primarily 3 areas of camp life: water management, health, and nutrition. My family had lived in a war zone. To return to one was the last thing that my parents had wanted for me. I found myself in the middle of the Sahara Desert, wind and sun and sand bearing down on me. I was thin and 6 feet tall, so immediately I stood out. A white girl with pale skin, brown eyes, hair pulled back in a ponytail. I saw the people looking at me with wild eyes, bodies tense. The little children who clung to their mothers in the doorways of the camps, in the camp tents, looked upon me with uncertainty. I was swept with a sense of nostalgia so powerful and familiar, I reeled from the unintended blow. An older man, the cultural leader of the camp, was the first to formally greet me. I held my notebook and pen in my hands and bowed my head respectfully as he addressed me. He held his head high. His eyes were the color of brown glass. His wrinkled lids drooped over the tops of his eyes. His voice was deep and windy and old. He said, "White girl, let me tell you." I listened quietly as he told me everything he wanted and needed. When he was done, I looked him in the eye and said slowly, "I, too, am Muslim. I, like the people in this camp, also come from a history of war and displacement." The old man listened to my words and with grave interest. I could see a dawning understanding grow in his eyes. Then a smile emerged on his face, revealing a set of strong teeth that matched the set of his jaw. He said, "Yes. Why else would a white girl who was comfortable in one country choose to go to a new country to learn of the discomforts of other people?" He added, "I understand your empathy and your connections to this place now. Even though we look different, every refugee feels for another." I'm going to skip a little bit ahead. Mama taught me how to read and write early. She used different colored crayons to write out the alphabet for me to repeat after and trace. I practiced until I knew the alphabet and then practiced some more until I could read my letters and write simple words. Whenever I grew restless, we played quiet games together. Mama had little toys around the apartment for me to find. We raced each other, fingers to our mouths, as fast and as quietly around the rooms of our apartment, the bedroom, the common area, the bathroom, as we could. Sometimes we played a game of "Do you remember?" "Myra, what do you do when the sirens go off?" "Get the key from the hook, lock the door, go down to the basement, wait there until the sirens go off, stay there until the neighbors leave the basement, follow them, return to the apartment, unlock the door, put the key back on the hook, sit, color, or draw until you come home." "Mama, what do you do when you come home?" "Race up the stairs and call out, 'Myra, Myra, Myra,' on the landing." We laughed when we played the game, but we never laughed when Mama came home in real life. She was always out of breath. I was always out of breath. Our hearts pounded in our chests, in each other's arms. "Myra, do you remember Papa?" On the day Papa joined the army, the sun was warm and bright as Zenitsa. Papa came home in his usual fashion. Once the greetings were done, he moved to a chair in front of the television. His long musician's hands clasped and unclasped beneath his chin. He looked into the dark screen of the television, studying his reflection. Mama was in the kitchen. I was at the table with my coloring books. In a careful voice, Papa called Mama and me to him. Mama picked me up at the dining table and held me in her lap on a chair by Papa's. Papa cleared his throat before he said, "I have news. Today, the Army of the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina came to my workplace to do a draft. I was not drafted, but our dear friend was. As you know, he is Catholic. As you know, the Army is entirely Muslim. As you know, he would not survive the war in the Army as a Catholic man." I turned up my head toward Mama. Her eyes were on Papa's face. She studied him, her brow furrowed. "What?" she asked. Papa cleared his throat. His large hands now capped his knees. He leaned toward Mama and me and said, "I could not live with myself if I let my best friend die. I have volunteered to go in his place." Mama's body became stiff where moments before it had been soft. She said, "You volunteered to join the Army in order to save your dear friend?" Papa nodded. She repeated her words, "You volunteered to join the Army in order to save your dear friend?" Mama shook her head, but she said, "Okay." That evening, we sat at our square table around the light of a single candle and ate quietly. We each had a piece of bread. Mama and Papa drank water. I had a glass of powdered milk. Mama and Papa each took only a few bites of bread. Then they piled the leftovers on my plate as they did every night. They both said, "Myra, eat up so you can grow up." Mama and Papa sat on either side of me, their arms resting on the table. So I'm going to skip ahead. For 8 years, Myra and her mother waited in the apartment without electricity or running water. For 8 years, Myra ran down to the basement and climbed up again when the sirens went off. But in 2001, her family was accepted for resettlement, and of all of the places, Minnesota was where they came. For my 13th birthday, the family took me with them to Sam's Club. I could not believe what was before me, boxes and boxes full of food and supplies. They smiled at my wonder. At home that night, they presented me with the biggest chocolate muffin I'd ever seen in my life. Everyone sang happy birthday to me. I thought we were all going to share the giant muffin, but the host family laughed and took out a case full of equally big muffins and said that we each could have our own. I went to Macalester College. I knew exactly what I wanted to study, international studies and economics. I wanted to help rebuild what the wars had broken. Richard Holbrooke was our freshman convocation speaker. He was the man who drafted the peace agreement that ended the Bosnian War. As he was talking, I felt the goosebumps rise on my arms, not because of the content of his words, but for the fact that life had brought me to this moment in time. In my junior year of college, for a moment, I questioned what I wanted to do and who I would become. Then I discovered that I had been placed in Kirk Hall, in Kofi Annan's old room. Kofi Annan was then the 7th Secretary General of the United Nations. I reckoned with myself. There was always only one thing I would ever become, this child refugee, a person who knew and understood what it was like to grow up in a war. I had to become brave, and I had to use whatever means I could find to save the pieces of myself that were in danger of dying in that lonely apartment where I waited for peace. Myra Muchik Gibbons. When I met Myra, we had on the exact same sweater. I am barely 5 feet tall. Myra is 6 feet tall, but there we were in this tiny coffee shop wearing the exact same sweater. Then we started talking, and Myra talked about the work that she was doing for the ARC, and I was thinking about the stories that I write on the page. My mom says to me, why do you write about such sad things sometimes? Why do you want to go through all of the hardship again when you don't have to? You love dragons. Can't you write about dragons and the things that live under the water, the things that live beyond the clouds? Can't you remember? Can't you write about those mountains that we left so long ago? The peaks so high that they tickle the belly of the clouds? Can't you write about these things? But like Myra, I am trying to save what that refugee camp could not do, could not take away. My belief that each and every single one of us, that we matter to history, that we're creatures of history, that it is history that we are contributing to each and every single day, with the words that we write, with the things that we say to each other, with the rise of the sun and the rise of the moon. I'm here today because when you look at Myra and me, you probably don't see all of the things that we have in common. When you look at my mother and me, you probably see how much I look like her, but you don't see all of the things that she's done to make sure that I would be here. In Ban Binai refugee camp where I was born, Hmong people only got food 3 days a week, and we were expected to wait out the years. And every time I looked at my mother, she would give me the food in her hands, the food in her mouth. So my mother, every time the wind blew, it would blow into her. 6 little boys couldn't come down to us because my mother didn't have enough nutrition in her body to sustain their lives, so I was her baby for the longest time. When you look at my mother, you probably can't see how brave she is, how when I was a kid, she, with the WIC vouchers in her hand, stood in those grocery store lines, and everybody said, why are you taking so long? You people, what are you doing here? But how my mother stood there with her neck, her chin held up, so that my sister and I could look up to her, that we didn't have to look down at our feet in shame and in defeat. This is why stories matter. It is on the strength of that woman that I stand before all of you today. I don't have any speech in hand. I don't go with speeches in hand. I'm here because this is a conversation. And so at this time, I'm going to invite your questions, your curiosity, and your care, and we'll begin there. The ball is now in your court. Thank you. So please don't be shy. McAllister students are not known for being too shy, especially in forums like this.
I'm happy to run the mic to you. I see a hand. Questions or comments?
Oh, I'm right there.
Your
Oh,
own
perfect.
feelings about stories, your own thoughts?
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I read your book, The Late Homecomer, in a class sophomore year, and it actually changed my life. So you're just wonderful. Thank you for doing what you do. But I'm curious.
Thank you. Can I get your name?
Yeah, hi, my name's Liv. I'm a senior.
Lovely to meet you.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm curious what the experience of writing The Late Homecomer was like in comparison to the book you just published about your mother's life.
The Late Homecomer, I was 22 years old. I was a senior at Carleton College. My grandma, who had never been to school, who didn't know how to read or write, who all of my life with her signed her name with a shaky X that stood in for Jolie. My grandmother had said to me that when I graduated, then she would leave the car and that I could hold her hand and I could walk her, to we called it the bald spot. And I could show her the trails that the squirrels and the bears and the deer had made through the pine trees. But in February of 2003, my grandma fell in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. And when I went to her and I said, "Grandma, get up," she said to me, "Menai, I'm not getting up again." I started to cry, and my grandma said to me that there were people who loved her before me. Before me, she had a mom and a dad and brothers and sisters. My grandpa, her most precious baby girl. My grandma said that I wouldn't be able to find a Hmong land in the map of a bigger world, but she was going to climb the Hmong mountain that lives in her heart. And the house of her youth will stand, and she'll swing that door, and everybody will be there, and they'll say, "Why are you so late in coming home?" My grandma's big fear was that she would be forgotten. When she died, my aunts and my mom went through all of her 13 suitcases because none of her children could afford a house big enough so grandma could have a room of her own. So she carried those suitcases from one house to the next. And in the final one, they were shocked to find that it was just full of love letters that my older sister and I had written her all of the years when we were apart. We knew our grandma couldn't read, but we thought if we pressed really hard on the pages, she could feel our love. And I picked up this postcard that I sent her from Thailand when I did a study abroad because I was in love with an actor called Noom Songlam Tapitak. I didn't know how big, I was a refugee camp kid, so I didn't know how big Thailand was. And then I didn't know how big Bangkok was. The most visited city in the whole wide world, right, Bangkok. I didn't know where to find them, but I found a postcard. So I sent it to my grandma to see if she would approve. She read it so many times that all the ink had fallen off. And all you could see was how hard I pressed onto the page. The Late Homecomer began as a love letter to my grandma. All of the things that I would never forget about her. But I was on page 37. And my dad said, "What are you doing?" And I told him, "I'm writing my final love letter to my grandma," because I was young. And I thought that if I put everything that I felt onto the page, and somehow I would learn how to live in a world without her. I didn't know then that I would spend the rest of my life writing love letters to my grandma in my journal, and that the letters wouldn't change that much either. Grandma, the kids here, the people here don't know that I have you, but I know that I do. What do you do with your everyday? Do you ever think of me, your granddaughter in Minnesota? So I told my dad it's a final love letter, and he looked at me and he said, "Do you know that if you dream in the right direction, the dreamer never wakes, the dream never dies, it grows bigger and bigger?" So 22 years old, and I had this idea, what if I turn this into a book? Then if I get lucky and I get to become an old woman, wouldn't it be nice if the world remembered? When my memories grow wings and they start flying far away from me, wouldn't it be nice if the world remembered? 22 years old, 27, and the book comes out, makes a writer out of me. And I knew that there were 3 memoirs that I wanted to write, that I owed it to all of the forces that had made me possible. I wanted to write about my grandma, but I also wanted to write about my father, and I wanted to write about my mother. But writing about my mother was the hardest thing. It's a hard thing for any child to take on their parents' voice, especially their mothers, I think. But I also didn't want to be one of those writers who publish their mother's stories only after their mothers were gone. In the pandemic, suddenly all of these people who I thought wouldn't die were leaving us. And so there I was. Did I want to write the book when my mother was still here to correct me where I was making the mistakes, or did I want to wait until she was gone? And I chose to be brave. So with her permission, I wrote her book. But my mother has said to me, I never want to be in the room when you're reading from that book, because I will see you and I will cry, and you will see me and you will cry, and we will cry too much. It is a much older writer's work. When I read my books, I can see I'm now the author of 13 books. Next year, I have 3 more picture books coming out. The year after that, I have a young adult memoir coming out and a young adult novel. I'm writing across the age spectrum for different audiences in a different mediums. It's because I know I deserve more than one chance, right? When you write a book, you think it's the only thing, that you realize, oh, it's only beginning its life in the world. It's going to take forever to grow. I've never been a popular kid. There was no indication that I was going to be a popular writer. You know, I'm a critically acclaimed writer. I'm not a best-selling author, just so you all know that we're all clear with each other here. But the hardest thing for me to learn was that I was worth more than one chance. When you're young, you think you only have one chance to do something. And you think if you don't get it, then you have failed yourself and everybody else who believes. But when you become 40-something, you know that you have to demand that second chance and that third chance, and that you are worth all of the chances that our world can give. So it's a much older author writing. I'm doing some things much more consciously on the page from a craft perspective. From a heart perspective, same, shivering heart. You never know if you can do it. You know that you cannot do the story justice. But you know the rock in my throat, you know what finally freed me? My mom said to me, because I tried it in the second person, the omniscient, I tried it in all kinds of perspectives because I was trying to avoid the first. And my mom said to me, do you know how many times I've spoken so that your needs might be met? The rock in my throat. How many times at all of those conferences, at all of those stores, did my mother ask for things so that my needs might be met? And I thought I can do no less. And so, Where Rivers Part fulfills my 3 memoir, and I'm off into fiction land for a while. It's very exciting. It's very exciting. But I'm very proud of the book. You know, Late Homecomer had won a Minnesota Book Award, Song Poet had won a Minnesota Book Award, and this year, if I had to choose one title, because last year I had 5 books come out, one for the United Nations International Fund for Agricultural Development. It would never be published in America. That's for the children of Laos. But 4 of them were all contenders. And I thought, let one book win, but then sometimes your life becomes like a dream. And there we were, my mother, my father, and me, and my siblings, and I won in all 3 of my categories. So now I'm like the winningest Minnesota Book Award writer in the state. It's not gonna last long. But all of that changes the ways in which I encounter the page and the way in which the page meets me. Did I answer your question? Thank you for being the brave first.
Hello.
Hi, what's your name?
My name's Greg Robertson.
Greg Robertson.
It's very good to meet you. Thank you. This has been inspiring. Wyatt is a friend of Max's. How is Max doing?
How is Maxwell doing? Maxwell is 21. Maxwell is at Stanford fighting it out. Maxwell is an interesting character.
He is.
My heart is always in a hurry. I'm always racing. I don't run fast, but my heart runs fast. So I'm always racing. Max takes his time. It took me the longest time, Greg, to realize that we're all on different timelines, that he's occupying his timeline and I'm in my own. So my rushing heart, can't pull his along. But the interesting thing is, because of the nature of his heart, he's forcing me to slow down and to see things in an entirely different way. And Max, like so many of the young people in this room, they teach us that each of us, that we are limited by the range of our experiences. each and every single one of us, love challenges us to go beyond the things we know. And so Maxwell is challenging me to grow and to know different things all the time. And for all this, I'm so thankful. Max is my baby brother, and he lived with me for most of his K through 12 education. And so I'm part big sister and part mother to this kid. This kid who used to tell all of us, he'd say, look into my eyes, and we look into his eyes, and he'd say, do you see yourself there? We'd say, yes. He says, do you know why? We'd be like, why? He's like, because my daddy said long before I came, he was looking at the world for me, looking at the world for me, and I'm looking at the world for you too. It's Maxwell. He's a special kid, young man.
Will you do us a favor? Just tell him Carol and Greg and Wyatt's his friend.
I will. I haven't talked to him this week yet, so I will. Thank you.
So thank you. I really appreciate the storytelling, in particular that you're doing through the different mediums, from children's books and the poetry. I've actually performed with the Minnesota Opera a number of times, and I was a volunteer usher for the Song Poet.
Oh, how lovely.
So I got to see your beautiful production, and I'm really curious what that was like to see. And the Minnesota Opera, for those that don't know, are really committed to telling new kinds of stories, so they uniquely do that more than many other opera companies. So I'm really curious what that was like for you to see your work come to life through something like an opera.
You know, it was such books are like children. They really do take their own journeys. And if we're lucky, we get to adventure with them. I wasn't going to be the librettist on the project. They had paid for a New York librettist on the project initially, and I was very hopeful that this New York librettist would write a beautiful libretto. But when I read it, I knew it was deeply problematic. It was going to be the first time the Hmong story was on an operatic stage, and we were somebody else's vehicle to say what they wanted to say. And so I said, this can't be, for all of these reasons. And then they looked at me and they're like, then who's gonna write the libretto? And I looked down and everybody kept looking at me. And so then I thought to myself, I had this moment where I said to myself, Kalia, and you know, as a poor kid, as a refugee kid, and the kid who grew up, you know, I'm from East Side St. Paul. It is the most demographically diverse and the most impoverished segment of the capital city. I didn't have a lot of chances to go to operas. I went to my first opera at Carleton. I was a trio student, and so they took us to our first opera. When the lights went down and the music started, I fell asleep. It was not, you know, and so in graduate school, when I was in New York City, you know, you can get $5 tickets to go to the Met. And so I went to a few of those shows, but the same thing happened. The lights would go down, the music would start, and I would not go. And so I didn't think opera was for me, and certainly, how would I even begin? But then I thought to myself, if I say no, then I would be saying to some kid from the poor side of town that just because you've never been exposed to something, you can't do it. And I didn't want to be that person. So I said to Minnesota Opera, if you show me what happens in front of your curtain as well as what's happening behind it, if you let me see your librettos, then I'll do it. And so then suddenly I was no longer just the author, I was a part of the whole thing. And what a magical experience for me. It all was such a big collaborative adventure. You can't be a good writer if you're not a team worker, because you have editors and lots of people, but that's even more true in the world of opera. You have to trust each other in an entirely different way. But the incredible thing was that my father saw the opera. And he sat there, him and my mom, they were so tense, they sat there. And my students, I was then at the University of Minnesota teaching in their MFA program, and my students came up to him afterward and they said, how was it for you? And my dad said, I'm gonna need a lot more than 15 minutes to process. And then he said, you live your life once and it is your life. You see it before you again and it becomes art. I think about those words often. But I'm so thankful, that we've done that. And that in doing so, I became good friends with the team at Minnesota Opera. And if there's a question of whether Kalia wants to do another libretto, I can do a better libretto. second time, right? We have to ask for those opportunities in the world. And so, yeah, I totally, I think it was a beautiful experience. And I think that's why so many of my books have soundtracks now, because I see the way music and words come together in an entirely different way. My father has a beautiful voice. When he sings, he doesn't need instrumentation, right? It's the wind and the water, all of that. I'm not his, I'm not my father. When I sing, my dad says I'm a little bothersome. So, wow, what a joy to see the incredible artistry and talent of people who want to put truth in a story. It's such a gift. And we're planning something very cool, so we'll see. And I'm going to wait for Hui and Kala to tell me when we're out of time.
I don't know. This could go on forever.
Perfect. Please.
Hello, thank you for your meaningful talk. I'm Lenzi, coming
Hi.
from Romania, and I spent the last year of my high school in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So your stories were very, very meaningful for me. So I'm wondering if you can tell us more about how to take care of our own story and other people's stories, and how to share them in a meaningful way, as you did, even though we are not writers.
Thank you for your question. That's such an important question. When I was a young writer, refugees would come up to me and say, will you tell my story? And I'd say no, because I, as a member of an underrepresented community, I know how important our voices are. I know how important it is that we get to be the authors of our own story. And so I became a teacher, and I still teach. I became a teacher, and I was teaching writers, but it was 2016. Donald Trump had just been elected for his first term, and I could hear the rhetoric, and I knew that the winds were shifting. And so I thought about all of these stories, and I thought about what I could do, and what I could do with a level of tenderness and sensitivity. And I remember my grandma, who had been a shaman and a medicine woman. She'd always say to me, you're going to build your life because of your faith, not because of your fears. I was so afraid. But I chose to believe. So Somewhere in the Unknown World is my first statement to Donald Trump. And I wanted to center in the Twin Cities, the American heartland, right? If you look at America, we are the beating heart of this country. When we talk about immigrants and refugees, we talk about New York and California, the coast. But we are number one in secondary refugee resettlement in the nation. And so I did the thing I thought I would never do. I said, I want to write a book about refugee stories. If you want to share it with me, then please do. I'm not going to be a mirror. My objective is not so that you can see, a projected image of yourself. I'm going to draw a portrait of your life. And I said to myself, I'm only going to talk to 14 different people, because knowing me, I would never stop. And then I would want to write 14 different books. But then I was thinking a presidential term could only last 4 years. And I wanted to get the book out by then. And so the first 14 people to talk to me, no matter what they gave me, I said, I'm going to write your story. And that's exactly what I did. I wrote their stories. And first and foremost, in my heart, I knew that I wanted the stories to be a gift for them first. Before it was anything else, I wanted it to be a gift for each individual. So before the book comes out, I'm all shaky because I'm scared what they'll think. I send them all copies before it comes out, because I don't want to shock anyone. But the thing about being the kind of writer I am, right, I have to ask a question. Is this accurate? I don't ask, do you like it? And one by one, these emails and these phone calls came in. And it was people crying. It was people's children crying. But I want to tell you, just 4 days ago, I got an email from Bayan, whose story, the Syrian wars, was in here. And Bayan said, I've been so scared. And finally, I want to thank you, because the government has toppled, and there's going to be, we hope, promise. And Bayan said, thank you so much. I never expressed to you how much it meant to me. But that was 5 days ago. We are all creatures of history. And we're tiny, tiny in the book of humanity. Tiny, tiny. So the question is always, right, that trepidation you feel, that fear that you feel, let it guide you on the page. There's a role for it within the work. And that's always what I think about. But I'm still a youngish writer. I think when I'm 60 or 70, when I'm wiser, it's going to be a different answer that I'll give you. But yeah, I know where my heart is, and I know where my heart is playing, and I know why my heart is playing. I know why I said yes to this talk, right? You all know, and I know, the histories are getting erased all around the world. We live in an age of conscious, systematic forgetting. It is our memories that are our friends. It is our remembering that's going to lead us to the future. Stories are the way we remember the beat of the human heart, not the numbers. Not the numbers, it's the stories, that light that we shine on one beating human heart at a time that matters. Yeah. Anyone else before we call it? Oh, right here, you get the final question. What's your name?
Hi, my name is also Kalia.
Yajong.
I'm a first year here, and at Mac we don't have a lot of Hmong students, so it's definitely hard feeling like the minority, especially how we're always like the minority. So I feel like even if my friends ask me like, what type of Asian am I say Hmong and they don't know what that is. How do you deal with like being the minority, and how do you have the courage to kind of like embody that and find your strength in that?
Kalia, I'm so happy you're here. First and foremost, I gave a talk earlier this year at Winona State University. And Winona has been a dear friend of mine. The Late Homecomer, I've been a common book twice there, but when we're Rivers Park, they invited me back. And nobody ever sits in the front row, Kalia. But when I was at Winona, there were 5 Hmong girls, and they came and they took the front row. And when I was talking, they were all like this, so serious, and I wasn't quite sure why. And then when I was done, immediately 2 hands went up, and I said, yes. And one of them said, do you know how long I've been waiting for you? Do you know how long I've been waiting for you to come? This is my final year here. And she says, I don't know exactly your question. I don't know how you can stand there and be so happy and so proud to be Hmong. When I was a student at Carleton College, I went to Carleton with a hole in my jacket. And all first trimester, I held that hole closed because I didn't want to be embarrassed. I didn't want people to see. I didn't know that wealthy people don't notice the holes in other people's clothes. And if they do, it doesn't necessarily raise the kinds of questions that I was afraid of. You know, in the dorm, people would say, let's order pizza. And in my pocket, I only had $20, and it was supposed to last me the whole trimester. Right? And I realized how slow I was moving. I realized how many things I was trying to hold close, to hold apart. You know, we talk about the Eiffel Tower, and there are people in your classes who've been. I put my hand on metal and say it feels the same anywhere. It feels the same anywhere. I've never known how to get through brick. All of my life, I've never known how you make it to the other side because I'm not very physically strong. But if you give me a piece of glass, I really think give me enough time and I can crack through it. That's how I see it. And I think it's so lovely that I'm the happy ending that my mom and dad have been waiting for. I think it's so beautiful that I get to be up here before, like, you know, the Hmong kids in here. So often we're invited to sit in a classroom because we have something to learn. How often do we have something to teach? How important is it for me to be here? That our stories matter, just like every other story in the story of human life. I'm so proud to be one with all of you. You know, this year I became a Guggenheim Fellow, this past year, and it was me and Pahua, her 2 Hmong women were the first. That's incredibly exciting, the highest scholarly award in the land, working of all places from Minnesota, you know? I'm so proud to be among women in the world. I think we're so beautiful. I think we're so strong. I think we have so much to offer all of the world. I think we're vessels of so many untold stories and so many universal truths. And so I'm not that whole. I've long let go. I've long let go. And how much faster I'm able to move. But I'd be a liar if I told you that was going to be easy. You're going to have to fight to stay, you're going to have to fight to hold on, and you're going to have to fight to belong. Because again, people aren't sure what you have to offer yet. And you are young, so you don't know what you have to offer yet. But if you all only walk away with one truth, it is this: you must demand many, many chances to get it right. We're fallible human beings. Our bodies work in the world, they tire in the world. So you must demand. You must hold this place, because many, many more will come after you. Many have passed through. And together we stand from where we're positioned, and somehow we hold the sky up one day at a time. I tell myself 4 years is not that long, people. It's not that long. We will hold that sky up a day at a time. And in 4 years' time, in 8 years' time, we will meet again. We will meet again. And our stories, we will carry them with us. We will not forget. We will not forget. Thank you for having me. If this conversation has been productive at all, please thank the team that put it together. And if it sucks, then please blame them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalia. Thank you, thank you.